Why was the old man sitting there with a rifle, as if the world had forgotten he wasn't supposed to? The guards didn't know his name, not at first. To them, he was just another resident of the senior community, frail, slow-moving, a relic among relics. But the way he held that rifle, steady hands despite the years, an unshakable calm, like a soldier waiting for orders that would never come. And across the courtyard, a young woman paused, frozen, as if the sight of him pulled something loose inside her chest. Her name was Captain Elena Marlowe, Delta Force pilot, sniper qualified, a soldier who had spent half her life flying men into places they weren't supposed to be, pulling them out broken, sometimes not pulling them out at all. She was home on temporary leave, visiting her grandfather in the memory care wing. She wasn't supposed to be here in this courtyard at this exact moment, but she was. And when she saw the rifle resting on the old man's lap, polished wood catching the sun, she felt something stir, a recognition she couldn't name. The guards moved first. "Sir, I need you to put the weapon down, now." The younger one barked the order, his voice sharp, overconfident. Elena's jaw tightened. She knew that tone, rookie security, someone who'd learned posture and aggression from training videos, not from the weight of actual danger. His name tag read Mark. His partner, older, heavier, hung back with uncertainty. The old man didn't move. His hand traced the rifle stock as if the weapon were a memory, not a threat. He spoke softly, voice gravel and time. "It's a beautiful day, son. Just cleaning my rifle. The humidity's bad for the action." Elena caught her breath. She shouldn't have cared. It wasn't her fight. But the words ordinary, gentle, hit her differently. They reminded her of the first time she'd cleaned a weapon under her father's eye, the ritual patience of it, the way he'd said, "Respect it. A rifle's not just steel. It's a promise." Mark didn't hear the promise. He only heard defiance. "The rules are crystal clear. No firearms in common areas. Hand it over now." The old man's eyes lifted, pale blue, startlingly clear. They didn't flinch. They didn't plead. They simply looked, deep, steady, measuring. And Elena saw the guard falter just for a second under that gaze, because age hadn't dulled it. That was the look of someone who had once carried men's lives on his shoulders. She felt her throat tighten. But then it happened. The young guard snatched the man's wallet, flipping it open with an ugly laugh. He dug through it until he pulled out a faded patch, tattered cloth with an insignia Elena had never seen before. Not Army, not Air Force, not even Special Forces. Something older, something that felt secret. "Playing soldier in your old age," Mark mocked. The old man's voice changed. "Steel under gravel. Put that back." "Or what?" Mark sneered. He leaned closer, eyes narrowing at the rifle. "What's this? Some engraving?" He read it aloud, words dripping with contempt. "Project Ivory Serpent. We who are not. What the hell kind of nonsense is that? Some old-timers club." Elena's heart stopped. She had never heard those words before. Not in a briefing, not in classified debriefs, not in the whispered history of her unit. But the way the old man's eyes darkened, the way his fingers clenched around the weapon, the way the air seemed to shift, she knew. This wasn't nonsense. This was something buried so deep even her clearances hadn't reached it. And then she saw it, the man's grip on the guard's wrist. Not violent, but immovable, impossible. His hands looked brittle, skin thin, mapped with age. Yet the guard's face twisted in shock as he tried and failed to pull free. "You will not touch this rifle again," the old man said. His voice was flat, cold. It didn't rise, and yet it cut sharper than a shout. Elena's pulse hammered. This wasn't just an old man with a memory problem. This wasn't nostalgia. This was something else entirely, something dangerous. She should have walked away, should have left it to the security team, but she couldn't. Her father's voice echoed in her memory, low and heavy. "If you ever see a soldier done wrong, you don't look away." So she stepped behind a potted tree, hand slipping to her phone, thumb trembling as she scrolled through contacts. Not 911, not local police. Instead, a number she'd been given once at a Gold Star family conference. A colonel from Bragg. "If you ever see something that feels wrong about a soldier or a veteran," he had said, "you call me, day or night." Her breath shook as she pressed the call. Colonel Madson's office answered, professional, detached, until Elena spoke. "This is Captain Elena Marlowe, Fort Bragg. I'm at Tranquil Pines Senior Community. There's an elderly resident here. Name, Patrick Snyder. Security guards are harassing him. He has a rifle. There's an engraving, Project Ivory Serpent. We who are not." Silence. Not the pause of doubt, not bureaucracy. Silence like a switch had flipped. "Repeat that." The voice wasn't casual anymore. It was tight, urgent. She did. And in that moment, Elena realized she had just pulled the pin on something she didn't understand. Back in the courtyard, the guard tried to wrench free, cursing. His partner muttered, nervous, "Mark, let it go. He's just an old man." But Mark didn't. He reached for cuffs. "That's it, you're going in." Elena's hand shook against the phone. Her eyes stayed on the rifle, on the engraving, on the old man's stillness. And inside, beneath years of discipline, beneath the armor she wore as a soldier, something cracked. Because for the first time in a long time, she felt small, as if she was standing in the presence of history so heavy it bent the air. And when the distant thunder of helicopters began to roll across the sky, she knew this wasn't going to stay small. The others didn't notice it at first, just a faint chop easy to mistake for traffic or construction. But Elena knew that sound. Rotor wash, fast, too fast, military, not civilian. She stepped out from behind the tree, heart slamming, eyes tracking the horizon. And then the world broke open. Two black helicopters tore low across the neighborhood, skimming rooftops, unmarked, deliberate. They weren't headed for a base. They weren't headed for the hospital. They were descending straight onto the manicured lawn of Tranquil Pines. The residents gasped, hats ripped from heads, skirts whipped by the hurricane blast. Tools clattered across the garden. The young guard froze mid-lunge, his cuffs dangling, his bravado collapsing under the roar. Elena didn't flinch. She felt rotor wash before, had lived inside it, but never here. Never in this world of roses and walking paths and bingo nights. The intrusion was violent, surreal. The helicopters hovered low, doors sliding open, ropes uncoiled. And then they came, operators in sterile gray, faceless under helmets and goggles, moving with precision too smooth to mistake. Not Army Rangers, not SEALs. This was different, efficient, quiet, predatory. They formed a perimeter in seconds, weapons low but ready, posture radiating silent authority. Not one word spoken, not one wasted motion. Elena's chest tightened. She'd flown men like this, dropped them into places where names were erased. She knew their type, and she knew whatever this was, it was bigger than her, bigger than anything she'd touched. The lead helicopter didn't deploy ropes. Instead, its side door opened and a set of steps extended. A single man descended, late 50s, simple operational uniform, but his presence bent the air. General Alan Pierce. Elena's stomach dropped. She'd seen him once across a briefing room. His reputation was legend, cold, unshakable, carved from iron. And now here he was, walking across the lawn of a retirement community, boots silent against the chaos, eyes locked, not on her, not on the guards, not on the crowd. On the old man. On Patrick Snyder. Elena felt the world tilt. This wasn't about a violation of community rules. This wasn't about a rifle. This was about something deeper, something hidden under decades of silence. And somehow, by accident or fate, she was standing in the middle of it. The general stopped a few feet from the bench. He didn't spare a glance at the guards. His eyes scanned the engraving on the rifle. And then, to Elena's shock, his stern, combat-hardened face softened. He saluted. Not the casual gesture of protocol, not the automatic acknowledgement of rank. A salute sharp as a blade, deliberate, reverent. The kind of salute given not to a superior, but to a legend. And Elena knew, with bone-deep certainty, that whatever Project Ivory Serpent was, it had just stepped out of the shadows. And she had just stepped into it. What kind of soldier salutes a ghost? That question burned in Elena's chest as she stood frozen among the stunned crowd. General Alan Pierce held the gesture with an intensity she had never seen. The man was infamous for ice-cold detachment, for never showing anything except discipline. Yet here, in the middle of a sunlit courtyard, he looked like a disciple kneeling before a saint. Patrick Snyder didn't rise. He didn't need to. He gave a slow, tired nod, and in that quiet motion Elena felt something unravel. The general dropped his salute, but his voice rang out, formal, commanding, cutting through the roar of rotor blades. For the benefit of those who do not understand what they are witnessing, his tone was iron wrapped in reverence. You are in the presence of a ghost, a man whose name is a myth in the halls I walk. Patrick Snyder was a founding member of a unit that, for all official purposes, never existed. Murmurs rippled through the residence. A bingo partner, a quiet man who had sat at dinner tables, folded his laundry, tended roses, suddenly revealed as something else, something impossible. Elena couldn't breathe. She had spent her career in the shadow of the tip of the spear. She'd flown into fire, pulled bodies from wrecks, whispered prayers while engines bled. But even with all that, even with her clearances and scars and ribbons, she had never heard of this. Delta Force, SEAL Team 6, Tier 1, all the names whispered in awe, and yet General Pierce was saying out loud that even they were merely descendants of this man's work. Her hands tightened into fists. How could this be true? How could something so monumental be hidden from even her? Pierce turned then, eyes sweeping the guards. The younger one, Mark, looked pale, shaking, his earlier arrogance shattered. The older guard, Dave, stood still, eyes wide, shame written across his face. You, Pierce said, voice dropping to a lethal calm, are a disgrace. You mistook age for weakness, silence for submission. You put your hands on a man who carries more honor in his little finger than you will ever hold in your life. The words cut sharp, deliberate. Mark's mouth worked, but no sound came. Elena should have looked away, should have let it play out, but she couldn't, because her chest was tight with something she didn't expect, not fear, not anger, shame. Why hadn't she stepped forward sooner? She had watched, hidden, phone in hand. She had called it in. But she hadn't stood there, she hadn't defended him. And the weight of that choice pressed heavy, heavier than any mission she'd flown. Pierce faced Patrick again. Sir, he said, voice soft now, almost tender, it is an honor. But before he could say more, Patrick lifted a hand, a quiet gesture, enough to stop a general in his tracks. His gaze slid toward Mark, the trembling young guard. He was just doing his job, Patrick said, voice gentle again. A little too much vinegar, not enough honey, but he's young. We were all young once, full of fire, certain we knew everything. Forgiveness, simple, steady. Elena's throat closed. She had seen men kill for less. She had watched brothers in arms fracture over pride, over nothing. But this man, who apparently had walked through the blackest corridors of war, gave mercy as if it cost him nothing. Her heart ached, because she knew she didn't have that kind of mercy in her, not anymore. The general lowered his head, silent respect. Around them the courtyard was hushed, as if the whole world was holding its breath. And Elena knew something in her life had just shifted, permanently. Later, when the helicopters pulled away and the soldiers vanished as quickly as they had come, the courtyard looked unchanged. Residents shuffled back inside, whispering. The guards were gone, pale and silent. The rifle rested on the bench once more. Patrick sat with it, hand tracing the wood. Elena should have left, should have gone back to the memory wing to her grandfather, but her feet carried her forward, slowly, careful, until she was close enough to see the engraving herself. Project Ivory Serpent. We who are not. Her lips moved around the words. They felt heavy, older than language. Patrick lifted his gaze, eyes meeting hers. For the first time they weren't distant. They weren't watching somewhere else. They were fixed on her. "You've seen it now," he said. His voice was quiet, but she felt it in her bones. "Can't unsee it. Question is, what are you going to do with it?" Her pulse spiked. "What does it mean?" Patrick studied her expression, unreadable. "Means we were never there. Means we never existed. Means every scar we carried, every life we lost, vanished with the smoke. You serve, don't you?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Delta." A flicker, recognition, pride, maybe both. "Then you know." "No," she whispered. "I don't, that's the problem." He looked down at the rifle, fingers tracing the engraving. "Some truths don't fit in a briefing. Some truths, they'd break you before they freed you." Elena's chest ached, because part of her knew he was right. She had seen men crumble under secrets, classified burdens that ate them alive. But another part of her, the part that had flown too many missions into darkness without answers, screamed for light. "I need to know," she said, surprising herself. "Not for command, not for a file, for me." Patrick's pale eyes softened. He leaned back, exhaling. "Then sit." She did. The sun warmed her shoulders. The smell of oil and steel lingered in the air. And beside her, the quiet man who was suddenly not just a man but a legend, spoke with the weight of 1,000 unspoken missions. "It started before your time," he said. "Hell before mine, if I'm honest. Cold War, world burning at the edges. Things nobody wanted the papers to see, so they made us ghosts. 6 of us, no names, no records. Only one rule: if we were caught, we were nothing. If we died, we never lived." Elena swallowed. He tapped the rifle. "They gave us these, not standard issue, specially built, marked only for us. The engraving was a reminder we who are not, and we were, not in the eyes of the world." His voice drifted, soft. "But we were there, God help us, we were there." Elena leaned in, heart pounding. But he didn't say more. His gaze slipped distant again, lost in jungles, in fire, in faces she would never know. And she realized he wasn't going to hand her the story neatly. He was going to bleed it out in fragments, if at all. Her hand tightened on her knee. She hated mysteries, hated being kept outside, but something in her knew if she pushed, he'd shut down. So she stayed quiet. The silence stretched, and then Patrick spoke again, softer still. "We were not, but maybe you will be. Question is whether you're ready for that weight." The words sank into her, heavier than any order she'd ever received. Because she didn't know, she truly didn't know. And yet somewhere deep inside, she already felt the answer. What does a ghost remember when the world insists he never lived? Patrick's eyes glazed, but not with age, with memory, and Elena knew she wasn't in the courtyard anymore. Not fully. She was inside the places he was seeing. The air thickened, humid, oppressive. The quiet murmur of residents dissolved into the buzz of insects, the rattle of distant gunfire. He was young, she could see it. 28 maybe. Shoulders straight, eyes sharp, jungle canopy above, sweat stinging his skin. And in his hands the same rifle, new then, clean steel, cool stock pressed to his cheek. "Serpent 1, move." A voice whispered through the trees. Not radio, not comms, just a man's breath against the green. They didn't carry radios, couldn't risk it. 6 of them, shadows in a jungle that didn't want them. No patches, no insignia, not even names, only call signs. Patrick, Serpent 2. The mission was simple on paper, always simple on paper. Interdict a convoy, stop a shipment that didn't officially exist. No backup, no rescue, no recognition. If they lived, the world moved on. If they died, the world never knew. Elena's stomach twisted. She had flown classified insertions, but never like this, never with rules this final. Patrick's voice carried through the memory, low and steady. Eyes on target, weapons free. She could hear the stutter of suppressed fire, the quick, efficient thuds of bodies falling, the silence after, too much silence. And then chaos. Muzzle flashes in the dark, screams, the jungle erupting with fire that hadn't been on the map. One of them fell. A boy, barely 20, freckles on his nose. Miller. Patrick shouted, dragged him behind cover, but the wound was too deep, too fast. Elena felt her chest seize. Because even across decades, Patrick's voice cracked on the same words she had heard in her own nightmares. Go, don't look back, just go. The memory tore open like shrapnel, and then just as fast it closed, the courtyard snapped back. Sunlight, roses, the rifle resting on Patrick's lap. Elena blinked, breath shaking. He was staring at her, not the others, not the crowd, her. You see it now, he said softly, what it cost. Her throat tightened. How many? He didn't answer, just let the silence hold. She hated him for it, and yet some part of her understood. Numbers didn't matter, names didn't matter. The weight wasn't in statistics, it was in memory. Patrick leaned back, closing his eyes. For a moment he looked like he might not wake again. But then his voice came, quiet, gravel pulled from deep inside. They told us we'd never be remembered, that we'd fade, but memory, it clings, even when it's poison. Elena turned her head, staring at the rifle. The engraving glinted, we who are not. She thought of her own missions, the faces she remembered, the ones she tried to forget, men she'd carried out of wreckage, whispering last words to wives who'd never hear them. Her hands shook. She had never admitted it, not even to herself, but she carried ghosts too, and some nights when the base was quiet, she swore they were heavier than her own skin. Why me? She asked suddenly. Patrick's eyes opened, pale blue, steady. You didn't walk away, he said. She swallowed. That was it, that simple. She hadn't walked away. Her chest tightened, because part of her wanted to believe it, wanted to believe that staying, watching, meant something. But another part whispered the truth. She hadn't stepped forward, not when it mattered most. The shame burned again. Patrick didn't press. He only studied her as if weighing something unseen. And then, with a slow movement, he shifted the rifle toward her. Hold it. Her breath hitched. She shook her head. I can't. You can. His voice had no doubt. Ghost or not, steel remembers hands like yours. Her fingers hovered, trembling. Then she reached, touched the wood, the cold steel. The weight settled into her palms. It wasn't heavy like her sniper rifle. It wasn't balanced the same. But it carried something more, something alive. As her hands closed, she felt the echo. Not just the weight of a weapon, the weight of history, of promises broken and kept, of silence. Her throat tightened. Patrick's gaze softened. Now you see. And she did. Not everything, not the whole story, but enough to feel it press against her chest, against the scars she carried. Enough to know this wasn't just about the past. It was about her. The sound of approaching footsteps broke the moment. General Pierce returned, voice steady but urgent. We don't have time. There are questions coming. Command is already circling. Patrick. But Patrick cut him off with a raised hand. No command, no questions, she's the one. Pierce's eyes flicked to Elena, hard, measuring, and for the first time she saw something like conflict on his face. She's not cleared, he said. Patrick's voice was iron. Neither were we. Silence heavy. Elena's grip tightened on the rifle. She didn't know what they were pulling her into. She didn't know if she wanted it. But deep down, under the fear, under the shame, a spark burned. Because for the first time in years, she didn't feel like she was carrying her ghosts alone. How do you dig for truth when every shovel you lift might bury you deeper? That was the question pressing on Elena as she drove away from Tranquil Pines later that night, headlights cutting across empty roads. The rifle's image lingered in her mind, burned into memory. The engraving, the way General Pierce had saluted, the way Patrick's voice had cracked when he spoke of ghosts. She gripped the wheel harder. She shouldn't have taken the weight of it into her hands, but she had, and now she couldn't let it go. Back at Fort Bragg, her leave technically wasn't over, but soldiers didn't stop being soldiers just because the calendar said so. She reported in, checked flight logs, spoke to a couple of operators she trusted. Casual questions at first, nothing direct. And yet, the silence she hit was sharper than any answer. "Project Ivory Serpent," she asked one night, carefully casual in the flight hangar, the smell of jet fuel thick in the air. The sergeant she spoke to froze mid-motion, wrench in hand. He didn't look at her, didn't answer, just set the tool down and walked away. Another time, she tried in the intel vault. "Has anyone pulled archived data on operations predating Det 1? Something codenamed Ivory Serpent?" The officer at the terminal glanced up, her eyes narrowed. Then she typed quickly, frowned, and leaned back. "No record," she paused. "No access, Captain, not even a trace file. Whatever it is, it's buried deeper than black." Elena walked out, pulse racing. She had heard of buried programs. Tier 0, some called them. Missions whispered about but never written, never acknowledged. But to see one surface, here, through the hands of an old man with a weathered rifle, was something else. And it gnawed at her. She tried the colonel who had once told her to call if she ever saw something wrong. Madsen. He met her in a dim hallway, away from offices, his face lined with fatigue. "You shouldn't chase this, Marlowe," he said quietly. "You made the call, you did the right thing. Let it end there." Her jaw tightened. "Sir, I was there. I saw General Pierce salute a civilian. I need to know why." His eyes flicked down the hallway, scanning shadows. "Then you already know more than you should." That wasn't an answer, it was a warning. But Elena wasn't wired to walk away, not anymore. At night, she found herself in the barracks lounge, staring at her reflection in dark windows. She thought of Patrick, of his voice when he said, "We who are not," of the way his hands had trembled, not from weakness but from memory. And she thought of her own ghosts, the men she had flown home zipped into bags, the ones who had whispered their children's names as the light went out. She wondered if her ghosts would vanish into silence too. If her name, her sacrifices, would someday be erased like his. Her chest ached, because maybe that was the truth. Maybe all soldiers were just placeholders until memory faded. She hated it. One evening, as she sat outside the hangar, her phone buzzed. A restricted number. She answered, "Captain Marlowe." The voice was low, controlled. "Pierce." "Stop digging," he said, not a threat, a command. Her breath caught. "Sir, with respect, I don't understand." "You don't need to," he said flatly. "Ivory Serpent was never meant to surface. Snyder carried that secret for 60 years. Don't undo what he endured." She hesitated, her throat tight. "Why me? Why did he point to me?" Silence, and then softer, "Because he saw himself in you. That doesn't mean you need to follow his path." The line went dead. Elena sat there, phone against her ear, feeling the weight of words she didn't believe. She did need to follow. She couldn't stop. The next day, she pulled a string only she could pull. A pilot's clearance wasn't enough, but a sniper. Sometimes doors opened in places people forgot to lock. In the base library's classified wing, she searched by code, by motto, by fragments, nothing. Finally, she tried something reckless. She typed only 3 words into the system's restricted query line: "We who are not." The screen blinked, froze, and then instead of denying access, it flashed red: "Clearance invalid, attempt logged." Her stomach dropped. Someone would see that, someone would know. And within hours they did. A knock on her door, firm, relentless. She opened it to find 2 men in gray suits. Not army, not command, something else. "Captain Marlowe," one said smoothly, "we'd like a word." Her pulse spiked. She glanced at the pistol on her nightstand, too obvious. She kept her hands loose. "About what?" she asked. The second man smiled faintly. "About ghosts." Elena felt her blood run cold. They stepped inside, uninvited, movements precise, practiced. They didn't threaten. They didn't need to. Their presence was threat enough. Patrick Snyder should be left alone, the first said. You should forget what you saw. Her voice came out steady, though her heart hammered. And if I can't? The second man's smile didn't reach his eyes. Then you'll find out why some doors are locked. And just like that, they were gone. Elena stood in the silence of her quarters, chest tight, fists trembling. She wanted to believe she was strong, that she wasn't afraid, but the truth clawed inside her. She was afraid. Afraid because this wasn't just about Patrick anymore. It wasn't even about Ivory Serpent. It was about her. If she kept pulling, the ground would give way, and she didn't know if she'd survive the fall. But she also knew one thing: she couldn't stop. Because some ghosts don't let you. What do you tell yourself when the blood you spill doesn't even exist? Patrick's memories came in fragments. They always did. Sharp cuts of violence stitched to silence, never in order, never gentle. And as Elena sat across from him days later, back in the courtyard, pretending this was just another afternoon, she felt him drifting again, carried away on tides she couldn't see. It started with a sound, the click of a safety, not here, not now, somewhere else. The jungle was gone. This time it was desert, hot winds scouring sand against his skin. A convoy stretched across a dirt road, trucks marked with nothing, carrying everything. Serpent 2 said. His voice had been younger, clipped sharp. He lay prone on a ridge, rifle-braced, scope-cutting heat shimmer. Through it he saw men, faces sunburned, eyes hidden by scarves, soldiers, militants, contractors. In their world, names didn't matter. Targets were targets. Orders were orders. Beside him, Miller, still alive then, freckles sharp against a sunburn. He whispered, "They don't even know we're here." Patrick's jaw had clenched. They never know until they do. At the signal, fire cracked, suppressed but final. One truck stalled, smoke rising. Another exploded as charges buried in sand ripped through its frame. Screams, chaos. Patrick's shots were clean, clinical. Men fell where they stood, but through the scope he caught something else. A boy, no older than 17, running, not armed, just running. His finger froze on the trigger. "To take him," the order hissed in his ear. Patrick's breath caught. The boy's eyes were wide, terrified, searching the dust for escape. He wasn't part of this. Couldn't be. But orders didn't bend for hesitation. He pulled the trigger. Elena's chest tightened. Because even though she hadn't been there, she felt it. The recoil in her own shoulder, the crack in his voice as he whispered decades later, 17, maybe 18, I'll never know. The memory faded, but the weight lingered. Patrick's eyes opened, pale and weary. "We were shadows," he murmured. "Shadows don't ask questions, they erase them." Elena swallowed hard, throat burning. She thought of her own missions. How many times she'd been told not to ask who the targets were, just that they were. She thought of the nights afterward when she lay awake wondering if someone's son, someone's brother, had been in the wrong place at the wrong time. She had always told herself it was different, that her work was justified, that her ghosts were bearable because her orders had reasons. But listening to him, she wasn't sure anymore. Her voice broke the silence. "Did anyone ever know about what you did?" Patrick gave a humorless chuckle. "We didn't even know half of it ourselves. Missions were compartmentalized, names burned after use. We weren't supposed to last this long." His gaze sharpened. "Truth is, ghosts aren't meant to age, they're meant to vanish." Elena looked down at her hands. She remembered the two men in suits at her door, their warning, "Leave it alone." She remembered General Pierce's voice over the phone, "Don't undo what he endured." And yet she was here, still asking, still digging. Her stomach turned, because maybe Patrick was right. Maybe some truths weren't meant to survive. But then she thought of that salute, the sharp reverence in Pierce's eyes, The way the world had shifted when a general bent his head to an old man with a rifle. That wasn't nothing, that wasn't meaningless. And if Patrick had carried the weight of silence for 60 years, maybe someone needed to speak. She drew in a slow breath. If they tried to erase you, why keep the rifle? Why hold on to the one thing that proves it happened? Patrick's eyes clouded. His hand touched the stock gently, almost as if afraid it would vanish. Because it remembers what I can't say, steel doesn't forget. Elena felt her throat tighten. The rifle wasn't just a weapon, it was his testimony, his confession carved in metal, we who are not. Before she could answer, his gaze shifted, sharp suddenly. They've been watching you. Her pulse jumped. What? Two men, gray suits, came after you. Her stomach dropped. How do you? He gave a faint smile, humorless. You think they weren't watching me first. They've been circling since the day I stopped pretending to forget. Her hands curled into fists. She remembered the knock. The way the suits had stepped into her quarters like they owned it. The way their voices had wrapped around the word ghosts. Patrick's smile faded. His tone hardened. You still have a choice, Captain. You can walk away. Let the dead stay dead. Her breath came fast. And if I do? His eyes, those pale, washed-out blue eyes, locked on hers. Then you'll carry them, same as me. The silence after felt endless. Finally, Elena stood. Her voice was low, steady. I already do. Patrick studied her for a long moment, and in his gaze she saw something she hadn't expected. Not just warning, not just sorrow, but recognition. As if he knew she was already one of them, even if she didn't want to be. That night, Elena lay awake in her quarters, the hum of the bass outside her window. She closed her eyes, but instead of sleep, she saw Patrick's memories. The jungle, the desert, Miller's freckles, the boy running, the words carved into steel. And when morning came, she made a decision she knew she couldn't take back. She was going to find out everything, even if it destroyed her. What's more dangerous, the ghosts you carry or the ones you chase? Elena asked herself that every morning now. It had been 2 weeks since the courtyard, since the rifles and the helicopters and Pierce's impossible salute. 2 weeks of silence at Bragg, silence from Patrick, silence from command. But silence wasn't nothing. Silence was pressure. Everywhere she went, she felt it. The pause of conversations when she walked into a room. The glance of officers that lingered just a second too long. The way her secure terminal access took just a fraction longer to approve, like unseen hands weighed her name against a list. She should have stopped, she knew it, but stopping wasn't in her bones. Late one night, in the dim glow of the intel wing, she found her opening. A man named Donovan, chief warrant officer, 20 years in shadow ops. He was the kind of figure who lived between the cracks, never the highest rank, never the face of the mission, but always there. She had flown him into black zones more than once. He owed her, though neither had ever spoken it aloud. He found her in the vault room, hunched over a locked system. His voice was gravel, low. You're digging in places people bury for a reason. She straightened, heart thumping. You've heard of it. His silence was answer enough. I need access, she pressed. I can't get past Tier 1 clearance. Donovan studied her for a long moment. Then he sighed, pulled a worn keycard from his pocket. This burns me if anyone sees. You get one window, 30 minutes. Then it locks itself again. After that, you don't know me. Her throat tightened. Why? His eyes hardened. Because once, a long time ago, someone opened a door for me, cost him everything. Maybe it's my turn. He slid the card across the table. Her hand trembled as she took it. The system blinked awake. Access granted. Red folders bloomed across the screen, unlabeled, dates stripped. Only numbers. She clicked one. A document opened. Grainy typewritten lines stamped EYES only. She read, and her stomach turned cold. Ivory, Serpent, 1963. Laos border. Objective. Intercept Soviet arms pipeline. Result: successful interdiction, 17 hostile casualties, 0 friendly survivors reported. Her brow furrowed. 0 survivors, but Patrick was here, alive, unless survival didn't count when your existence was erased. She clicked another file. Ivory Serpent, 1967, West Africa. Objective: prevent coup instigated by foreign advisors. Result: mission denied, no record. Denied, no record, and yet there it was, filed anyway. Her pulse quickened. File after file scrolled past. Southeast Asia, South America, the Middle East before it was ever called that on briefings. Each stamped with the same seal, we who are not. And then she froze. A foe, black and white, edges blurred, 6 men, jungle behind them, no insignia, no names, only faces. One she recognized instantly. Patrick, decades younger, rifle across his chest, eyes already carrying the weight of ghosts. The others strangers, except one. Her breath caught. It was Pierce. Not older, not the general she knew, but younger, hard-edged, hair darker, jaw sharp, standing beside Patrick, rifle in hand. Her hand flew to her mouth. General Pierce hadn't just saluted Patrick out of respect. He hadn't just recognized him from history. He had been there. She snapped the file shut, heart racing. She shouldn't have seen this. She shouldn't know. Behind her, Donovan's voice was grim. Now you understand. This isn't history. It's still alive. And it'll kill anyone who digs too deep. She swallowed, staring at the dark screen. What happened to the others? She whispered. Donovan shook his head. Don't ask questions you're not ready to answer. The 30 minutes were up. The keycard locked itself, light fading. Elena walked out into the cool night, stomach twisting. The image burned into her mind. Patrick and Pierce, side by side in a war that never existed. The next day, she went back to Tranquil Pines. Patrick was in the courtyard again, rifle across his lap, but his hands shook now. Not with anger, not with memory, with age, with frailty. She felt panic rise. Time was slipping. His stories, his secrets, they were bleeding away faster than she could catch them. She sat beside him, her voice soft. I saw a photo. His eyes flicked to hers, sharp even through the weariness. Which one? Her throat tightened. You lost Pierce. For a moment, silence. Then Patrick exhaled, a sound heavy as stone. So he let you see, he murmured. Or maybe you forced it, doesn't matter. The past always finds its way back. Her chest ached. Why didn't he tell me? Why keep it buried? Patrick's pale eyes locked on hers. Because survival's not the same as living. We came back breathing. That doesn't mean we came back whole. His hand touched the rifle. Some truths stay buried because speaking them costs more than silence. Pierce knows that. So do I? The question is, do you? Elena swallowed hard. Because she wasn't sure anymore. She wasn't sure of anything except this. She couldn't turn back. Not now. Not with Patrick fading. Not with the ghosts pressing closer. What do you confess when your body is failing, but your ghosts never will? Patrick's hands shook as Elena found him in the courtyard again, this time without the rifle. His lap was empty, his breath shallow. A nurse hovered at a distance, uncertain, watching with the quiet pity people gave veterans who outlived their wars. Elena sat down beside him, heart tight. His skin looked thinner than ever, eyes watery with exhaustion. And yet when he turned his head toward her, the pale blue gaze still cut like glass. You're running out of time, she said softly. His lips twitched. Not me, you. Her pulse quickened. Then tell me what I need to know before they take it away. Patrick's chest rose with a ragged breath. His fingers trembled, but he lifted one, pointing at her. Careful what you ask for, Captain. Some memories don't fade, they rot. And when they rot, they take you with them. Elena leaned closer, voice low, urgent. Then let them take me. Just don't take them to the grave. His eyes closed for a long moment. Then, with a shudder, he opened them again, and she saw the shift. The courtyard dissolved. It was night, a rain-heavy jungle, mud clinging to boots, the smell of rot and blood thick in the air. Patrick's younger hands gripped the rifle, slick with sweat. His team crouched in the shadows, 6 phantoms breathing in unison. Their orders had been simple: infiltrate, extract one asset, a scientist, Soviet defector, target so valuable he wasn't supposed to exist. They moved silent, knives cutting more than guns. Throats opened like whispers. Tents collapsed under muffled weight. Finally, they found him, thin man, terrified, clutching documents like a shield. They pulled him out into the storm. Then everything went wrong. Floodlights snapped alive. Voices shouted in Russian and another tongue. Dozens of enemy soldiers poured into the camp. Tracers lit the jungle. Elena felt her chest seize as Patrick relived it. Miller was hit first, a scream cut short. Another Serpent went down beside him, 2 gone in seconds. Patrick dragged the scientist forward, shouting over the chaos, but the man resisted, begging in a language Patrick didn't understand, begging not to leave. Through the storm, Patrick saw why. The camp wasn't just a camp, it was a prison. Dozens of cages hidden under tarps. Women, children, starving, broken. Their eyes lit with desperate hope when the fighting began. And that was the moment, the choice that carved itself into his bones. Orders: extract one man, leave everything else. But ghosts don't get choices. The Serpent split, half covered the retreat, half tore open cages with knives and rifle stocks. Chaos erupted. Screams filled the jungle, more gunfire. Patrick carried one child in his arms as he fired with the other hand, rain mixing with blood. By dawn, the jungle was fire. Of 6 serpents, 2 crawled out, Patrick, Pierce, and none of the prisoners survived the escape. Elena's breath broke. She felt it, as if the ghosts pressed against her ribs, against her skin. The futility, the loss, the silence after. Patrick's voice was low now, a rasp. We saved no one, we lost everyone, and in the report it was denied, erased. We were not. His eyes glassed with tears he had never shed then. That was the last mission. After that, there was no more Ivory Serpent, just silence. Elena's throat burned. She wanted to reach for him to steady his shaking hands, but she couldn't move. Because she finally understood. We who are not wasn't just a motto, it was a wound, a scar branded into the men who carried secrets too heavy to name. And now it was pressing itself onto her. The sound of footsteps broke her trance. She turned and froze. 2 men in suits stood at the courtyard entrance, the same gray eyes, the same silence. Patrick's lips curled faintly. Told you, they're watching. Elena's body tensed, hand instinctively brushing her hip where a sidearm should have been. The taller man spoke, calm and cold. Captain Marlowe, Mr. Snyder, this conversation is over. Elena's voice came out sharp. He hasn't finished. The second man's smile didn't reach his eyes. He said enough. Patrick coughed, chest rattling, but even through weakness his voice cut like steel. They'll bury me, same way they buried Ivory Serpent. Question is, will you let them? Elena's pulse pounded. Because she knew, this wasn't just about Patrick anymore. It was about her. The line he had walked, the silence he had carried, someone had decided it was hers now. And the suits, they weren't asking. They were telling. How does a ghost die when the world never admitted he lived? Patrick's breaths came shallow now, his chest rattling like an old engine that had run too long. The suits lingered by the courtyard entrance, shadows in the sunlight, waiting for him to fade. Elena sat close, leaning forward, fists clenched in her lap. Every instinct screamed to push them back, to draw a line. But Patrick's frailty anchored her. He lifted his hand, slow, shaking, and she took it without thinking. His skin was paper-thin, but his grip still carried the faint iron that had once held rifles, carried men, pulled ghosts through jungles and deserts. They'll erase me, he whispered, same as the others. Her throat tightened. Then tell me what you want me to do. His pale blue eyes searched hers. For a long moment silence, then, remember. She blinked, that's it. A faint smile touched his lips, that's everything. Behind them, one of the suits shifted impatiently. Captain Marlowe, it's time. Her head snapped toward him. Time for what? Time for him to rest, and time for you to step away. Her jaw clenched. He deserves more than that. The man's gaze was cold, unblinking. Deserve has nothing to do with it. Patrick's hand squeezed hers weakly. Let it go, Elena. Don't waste your fight on them. Ghosts can't be argued with, we just fade. Tears stung her eyes. She wasn't used to crying. Not in front of anyone, but something about his resignation tore at her. She wanted to rage, to scream at the suits, at Pierce, at command, to drag the truth into the light. But when she looked at him, she realized he didn't want rage, he wanted peace. And for the first time in his life, he was asking for himself, not for mission, not for country, just for rest. So she nodded, swallowing hard. Then I'll remember, I promise. His eyes softened, and with a final slow breath, Patrick Snyder let go. The silence that followed was deeper than rotor wash, deeper than gunfire. It was the silence of something ending. The suit stepped forward, efficient, impersonal. One checked his pulse, though they both already knew. The other retrieved the rifle, sliding it into a black case as if it were nothing more than evidence. Elena stood, fury trembling in her limbs. That rifle is history. The taller man glanced at her, expression flat. History that doesn't exist. She took a step closer, her voice low, cutting. I held it, I know what it is. You can erase files, you can bury reports, but you can't erase people, not from those who carry them. For the first time his mask cracked, just slightly, a flicker of doubt. Then the case clicked shut. Patrick was wheeled away later, covered in a simple white sheet. No medals, no ceremony, just another old man gone quietly in a retirement home. The other residents whispered, eyes red, though most of them still didn't understand what they had witnessed weeks ago. Elena walked out into the night alone. The air was cool, the sky wide. She looked up, searching for stars but seeing only the shadows of rotor blades that weren't there anymore. At Bragg, whispers spread. She knew her query had marked her, knew the suits had filed her name. Her career might already be over, but strangely she didn't care. Because she carried something heavier now. In quiet moments she replayed Patrick's stories in her mind. Miller's freckles, the boy running through sand, the cages in the rain, the engraving etched into steel, we who are not. Ghosts, all of them. And she realized something that both broke and steadied her. She carried her own ghosts the same way. Faces from missions she had flown, names she couldn't forget, promises whispered into dying ears. For the first time, she understood what Patrick had endured, not just silence, but the weight of memory with no place to set it down. One evening, weeks later, she sat in a diner outside base. The same kind of booth Patrick had once claimed for coffee and pie. She ordered both, though she wasn't hungry. And when the waitress poured her coffee, Elena spoke softly, almost to herself. For him. The words weren't for the waitress. They weren't even for the room. They were for Patrick, for Miller, for every ghost. She didn't need the files, didn't need the rifle. The truth lived in her now, carved as deeply as the engraving on steel. We who are not. But maybe, just maybe they were, because she remembered. And maybe that was enough. The moral didn't come sharp like orders. It came soft, like the hum of engines after landing, like the hush of a rifle being cleaned under sunlight. Sometimes dignity doesn't shout. It doesn't demand medals or parades. Sometimes dignity lives in silence, in the ghosts we carry. And sometimes dignity doesn't speak at all. It simply endures.